we'll have a closer look at the top traded commodities from India, and then we'll try to look into what are the main markets that India is supplying those commodities to, and then we'll have a look at how the competitors are in that space. Just so that you know, the categorization of the commodities and the numbers that you see are based on the main commercial species. This is the way that the 𝗎𝗼 project has been conducted in. So the HS codes have been combined based on the 𝗎𝗼 project. We'll look at some trade volumes, and for shrimps, we'll also look into some of the prices aspect of things. And we'll look at how the trade has been going further in these different spaces. Starting with other marine fishes, so we see most of the volumes going as exports is from China, India, and Vietnam. Throughout all of the countries, at least those who are exporting, we did see a slight slowdown in the numbers, but a slight increase. But what is my impression is that last year was a bit interesting in the terms of the trade flows that was going around. Some of the reprocessing countries, such as even China, that we will see ahead, slowed down their exports and import strategies so that they wanted to see how the markets are going to phase out. Top importing countries were China, Thailand, Japan. China and Thailand are also very well known for reprocessing the products. So China is a key exporter, but also a key importer in the sense with the largest share in that case. And as we see again, there's a slight slowdown in the numbers across the various countries. India's top exports are going to China, Thailand, and Japan. So we'll have a little bit of an outlook on that. When we look at China, we saw a slight slowdown in the first part of the year, and India is the biggest supplier of the other marine fish category. Again, as I mentioned, that there was probably a little bit of a slowdown in volumes going out because countries are not sure how the markets are going to behave ahead. So the buyers of these products were not very confident at the time. But then as we see in 2026 for the first 4 months, it has really picked up. The supply is back again, and there's a strong supply for the 4 months compared to the same 4 months in the previous year. In Thailand, there has been an overall slowdown, and that has continued into 2026. In this case, Myanmar is the key supplier of Thailand, and that's where the slowdown comes from, because Myanmar, last year we saw that they had a bit of a ban in the beginning of the year, but once they lifted the ban a bit more earlier, you saw that the fishermen were a bit slow to head to the seas, and thus you can see that the supply is very much driving the supply into the countries such as Thailand. And over the course of the presentation, you will see a lot of these suppliers induced impacts on the imports of these countries. That always can be taken into account when you as an exporter or a producer country, because that means you have an opportunity to supply those supply gaps. In Japan, there has been a slight slowdown, and starting to 4 months of 2026 is continued as well. But China is the biggest supplier of it, and we did see a broad slowdown from China in that part of the year. But compared to the other counterparts, China has had a slightly stronger uptick towards Japan. So key takeaways, what are we looking at? We are seeing China indeed ends up coming out as a key supplier as well as an importer at the same time, and significant volumes are going in and out of the country. And overall, we saw that the volumes have slightly dipped compared to the previous year, but going forward, there seems to be some interesting possibilities for recovery from the previous year. Other cephalopods, so this includes also the squids and other species, so just so that that's taken into account. So the global key exporter is China again, Peru, and Argentina. India comes there as fourth, and all of them have actually seen stronger supply of other cephalopods. Global imports also, as you can see, is a reflection of it, primarily going to China, Thailand, South Korea, Japan, and we have European countries such as Spain and Italy who are bigger importers in the European side. India primarily sends most of its stuff to Spain, Thailand, and Italy, so I will and China, and I will focus a little bit on these countries. When we look at Spain, there has been, again, a strong interest in the supply going there. Couple of reasons. It's more of the supply route as well as the price point. And these countries are also heavily on tourism. on addition to domestic consumption and cultural patterns of consumption, it has really had a strong increase from a production point of view because key suppliers are producing slightly more. Amongst all the suppliers, we see India is one of those that have had a positive supply in this region. Thailand also has seen an increase in supply with the primary supply coming in from China and India. When we look at the first 4 months of this year, we see that the volumes from China has decreased, and it has been a slight increase from India in this end. In Italy, again, a key supplier is India, but we can see there has been some positive growth in this part of the year for volumes coming from India. But overall, there has been more or less the stable tone from the previous couple of years. And then we can see a strong uptick from Peru as well. And with Peru, it's kind of interesting because the supply from Peru is also a little bit of the impact of the El Nino, because once we have stronger temperatures in the water, the fish go away. And once the Peru supply goes down, you can see that automatic disruption in these two charts. If you see the big strong decline in 2024, that's when there was a strong El Nino. So that also says that if this year is a super El Nino, as they are trying to predict, so we can have an indication that there could be a shortage of supply, meaning you could also go forward to see if there are some supply gaps. And these kind of impacts are already also seen on the market in China, which strongly sources also from Peru in that case. And these are some things that we can take into account going forward in the next couple of months of this year. Shrimps. What we're going to look at in shrimps is that overall, there has been, compared to 2024, a slight increase in the supply of shrimps, about 5%. Primarily is China, USA, and the EU. What I'm going to look at today and take a little bit of a deep dive is into the Chinese, European, Japanese, UK, and US markets. And the perspective is to look at it a bit more closely from a price point as well as what has happened last year. So China, as you can see, there's been a slight slowdown, but it's understandable because China is a big shrimp producer themselves. So there's a bit of a domestic production value as much as an import, but the values are significant. What we can see from the key suppliers, that's Ecuador and India, we can see that market share slightly shifted away from Ecuador and went towards India as the supply really went into this year. And what we can also have a look at is that, which is particularly interesting, the first parts of this year has been exceptionally higher than when we look at it from the other 2 years, that is March, April, and May. Normally, after the Lunar New Year, there is a seasonal dip in the supply of the volumes. But however, this year has been exceptional, and the volumes have been up this year for the first part of this time. And you can see the prices also are significantly increasing. For the US, the story is indeed, you can see the supply in 2025 went really high up until the deadline of the products to come into the country. And significantly after that, you see the dip as soon as the volumes have decreased in the second part of the year. It had just edged up compared to year over year. So the volumes have remained more or less the same as 2024. However, going forward, this would also change a little bit in this perspective. And what is also interesting to see is that Ecuador has gained 4% of the market share compared to 2024. And in that case, for India, that's a slight dip. Also for Indonesia, we had the radioactive shrimp issue. And the Vietnam has seen a little bit of a slowdown in the volumes that have been going through. In the EU, you have, again, a significant increase compared to the past couple of years. And we have seen a supply uptick in the market share by 7% up from Ecuador. India has also seen a growth, whereas the other key suppliers have gone a bit down. Also to note that Argentina is the Argentine red shrimp. So that's not particularly talking about 𝗏𝗏𝗏 or black tiger, but we're looking at other cold water species as well. And that was also slightly decreased because of the catch issues that they were going through. The prices really started up top in this year, but now we see that it's coming down to prices of last year, but then it's still following kind of the trends of supply that has been seen over the previous years. For Japan, it is very seasonal, so they have a very stable and very demand-driven market. The prices have fluctuated a bit, but compared to 2024, 2025, we saw a slight uptick in the volumes, but more or less have all stayed in a more stable manner. And that's a very perspective of having Japan has a more predictable and stable market to have. In the UK, also there has been an increase, and this is going to be really interesting to see in the second half of this year how it's going to be. So far, it has more or less followed the pattern as before, but with the free trade agreements coming into place, we will have to see how this impacts the volumes that are coming in the second half of the year. And considering that Europe and the UK are on the way on the boat to supply, that might actually be an increase in Europe and UK in the terms of the supply volumes. However, the prices have been higher end, and that increases the value, the overall value of the product compared to the volumes that's being sent. So key takeaways. There are, what is interesting to see is that the key peaks in the Chinese market are more or less demand driven. You can always see it picking up in January just before Lunar New Year, and then a bit in the mid of the year. But surprisingly, as we can see, the last 5 months, the Chinese uptick has been stronger than usual. And Europe has, for the first time in this period, overtaken the US, and that's exactly the time when the tariffs were implemented. And you can see that the supply to the EU increased, and Europe is coming as a bit of a counterbalance to the US as well, and being a significantly important market coming up. The UK and Japan are still all in their same more or less spaces, but also with a lot of possibilities to expand based on free trade agreements and the demand. So thank you for your attention, and if you have questions later, please. Thank you.